gonna be a smaller group, so I'm gonna ask everybody to kind of move up a little bit to help us. If you all don't mind kind of sitting a little closer, I know you want to stay distance, but maybe not in the back, because this will be I'd like to not have to use my microphone. Always drag me into things. God, things. Pre-K teachers, you guys have it going on. Like, you understood some things, you know.
All that wasn't like get out.
That's just
in the office.
Because he's like, you say,
Yeah.
where's the cat?
You guys have no idea.
Yeah, they're all nice and true. They can stick their finger in their thumb in their mouth and their finger in their nose at the same time.
Simultaneous learning, we call it.
Okay. Just say, I can't do the front level. Wow.
Oh, we're
I'm admitting we need to write around.
We should do it.
Yeah, we're okay.
Let me make sure.
The problem is, I'm not for all.
You get your.
I would be friends with the person.
Well, recommends what it's over. There you go. I just washed my hands, I promise. I did copper
Is Jamie saying?
Okay. She's my concern.
Figured out
She was.
For every kid.
Are y'all okay? Listening to my neck the last week, so that people who aren't coming out the house. I was telling Rita in our county, there's over 5,000. But we're, you know, everybody's being safe and, you know, we're not asking. And he really thought when we were there, yeah, live, so they don't know. I know. Now, Ader actually came to some meeting. Ader was here, she's in still over there. Yeah. And they thought that, I'm like, she didn't do that.
Check my email again. So she
How much trouble will I be in if I bump that?
Lots? Yeah. Did you play with the idea?
I just have maybe two, so.
Hey, we get it. I don't want to hear it. Like it's flat out here.
Yeah.
You start looking, you can't see.
Jump 30 feet past your nose. I have great morning on flights and great friends there. So we have lots of great friends there. I was getting cold there, but.
Okay. Yeah, I've got 12:33, so we get started. I might actually get up. I don't think that hair looks any better than. Although some people are like, I want my money's worth. So, okay.
We'll be okay.
Okay. All right, so with all the background from this morning, what I'm going to talk to you today about is, I mentioned that the kind of remediation remediation that kids, and I think I say this in the presentation, but I can't remember, I wrote this long ago, but here's what I will tell you. The kind of presentation that we give to kids that are dyslexic, to type programs, how we go about the instruction, the style, the methodologies, all of those things are necessary for remediation of dyslexia. They are also necessary for children with other language-based disorders. They work with kids on the spectrum of autism. We've seen good success here on the mild to moderate range of autism. These programs work well with them. But remember what I said this morning about students, the average learner needs between 50 to 150 exposures to a concept, let's say a letter. But for the struggler, 500 to 1,500. How are you going to get those in? So there actually needs to be a curriculum designed specifically for those kids. And that's really what I'm going to talk about this afternoon. What does that look like? What are the components? And what do you do if you can't afford to get? Because in a lot of schools I go to, we just can't afford. But I think now that the legislature has said, here's what, in Oklahoma, God bless us, they're like, here we go, here's some problems, here's some ways to figure out the problem, but I don't know how y'all are going to fix it, just go fix that. And I know that we get that. But the good thing is that we have some really good resources out there to help us. So I'm hoping I can give you some of that at the end of this presentation. So let's talk about structured multisensory language. This type of instruction is also, what we now know is, go ahead to the next slide. So what we now know is this type of instruction is the antithesis to what probably most of us learned in college, which was, like I said this morning, this notion of holistic, and when I say warm fuzzy, I don't mean that to sound bad, not like we're just all the drill and skill and we're drill sergeants. That isn't what I mean. But what I'm telling you is the difference in, just let kids learn to read naturally, give them enough predictable text, rhyming books, and Dr. Seuss is fabulous. He was predictable before we even knew what that was. He had a different idea in mind. He wanted kids to learn about the fun with language. And that's what they need to learn. But as far as reading Dr. Seuss style books for decodability, that's pretty hard. So the notion is that what we know doesn't work for kids that are struggling readers, and I'm going to tell you this too, this is the spoiler alert. Hi ladies, what also doesn't work for dyslexic doesn't work very well for our lower elementary learning to read. So the inverse of that is true. Did you guys happen to get your knowledge survey? If you didn't, I have this little survey. I'll hand back over here. Did everybody get one of these little surveys? You keep those there if someone else pops in.
Hey Pam,
Yes.
can I talk to you using the mic, the other side?
Oh, sure.
I think we turned it up as much as we could. The mic.
Sorry, can you hear me? Okay. Sorry, I was feeling casual with this small group that we have here, but it's cozier, isn't it? So what we now know about this notion of structured multisensory language instruction is it's not just beneficial for kids with dyslexia. It is essential for them, but it's also extremely beneficial. And in fact, we now know that most early childhood children, let's say pre-K up through 3rd grade, this is the best way to teach kids how to read. And it just flies in the face of what we once thought we knew about the whole language approach to teaching reading. So here's some things that don't work. 4 interventions. Now, I'm not saying these are bad in and of themselves, but let me explain what I mean. So, guided reading. I'm assuming most of us teach guided reading. Do you all know how would you define guided reading? Somebody yell out some components of guided reading. What do? Got your reading groups going into guided reading. What do we do? Does anyone not do guided reading in here? it should be just exactly what it says. We're guiding students through a text, right? So we take them through things like picture walks. You all do picture walks with your text? What do the pictures tell us? What words might we encounter? We might even guide them through leveled readers. Do you all use leveled readers or core curriculum, or both? So I'm an advocate of both. It's okay, either or, but I'm a big advocate of both. Because we know that if, let's say, a student's in 3rd grade, but he's reading on the 1st grade level, it's just almost impossible to jump them from 1st to 3rd grade in that 1 year. Would you agree with that? They're already 2 years behind. So now we've got to remediate that and then accelerate that, which is really, really tough. But so for quote, guided reading doesn't work to remediate kids with our 20% who have dyslexia. And then this notion of what's called balanced literacy has been touted as, well, we get in all the 5 components. But I'm going to tell you, remember the 5 components are phonological awareness, phonics, vocabulary, comprehension, and fluency, right? Those particular things we throw in, some spelling as well. But for those 5 components, for what the National Reading Panel said, these are the areas. If kids can become proficient in these areas, they'll be proficient readers. Well, that doesn't mean that each of those gets the same rank, right? It doesn't mean that all 5 of those components in 1st grade are the same as what all 5 components will look like in 3rd grade. So the notion of balanced literacy, we have to be careful what we mean when we say those words. I like to use comprehensive, the word comprehensive literacy, which means I'm covering every piece and doing it well. That's what my goal is. And then the notion of an embedded phonics or embedded skills. And that's what I was taught in the whole language movement was, well, let's just put in a little bit of phonics in here so that they can be successful with this book. Well, that's good, but look at that. There's no scope and sequence. We're jumping all over the place, and honestly, teachers, we were exhausted trying to figure out how to do all this ourselves, how to put this all together. When what we needed was a really strong curriculum that gave us a great scope and sequence and enough practices in phonological awareness and in phonics. Okay? So that being said, I want you to take a look at your teacher knowledge survey. Now, I've created a couple of these. This one comes from really great reading. And let's just do this together. Number 1, this is just your knowledge of what are some of these academic vocabulary pieces. What is the second phoneme in the word right? Put a circle around one and tell me what you think. Second phoneme is what? Your choices are w, r, and I. What's the second phoneme? Somebody yell it out. I. It is I, because if we unblend sounds and we're dealing with just sounds, phonemes are individual units of sound. That's right. And what about how many phonemes are in thatch? 3. Atch, 3. Good job. And then how many graphemes are in thatch? 6. So I'm going to tell you how many graphemes there are. There are 2. There's only 3. You know why? A grapheme is a letter or letters that represent one sound. So let's unblend thatch. We said atch. What letters represent the sound? TH, and we know the vowel A. And then what says ch? We have 3 letters. So that's why we refer to those. I interchange those with teachers and with students and call them letters or graphemes. So grapheme is a letter representation, or sound representation in letters. How about the word chest? Does it have a consonant blend, a digraph, or both? It does have both. The digraph is what? CH, and the consonant blend is ST. Good job, good job. You all are smart. How many phonemes are in the English language? 760, 96, or 44? 44. Awesome. How many are those? How many of those are vowel phonemes? 18. Awesome. So, what is the most obvious difference between phonemic awareness and phonics? We've covered that pretty well, I think, today. Phonemic awareness has to do with the sounds, whereas phonics has to do with the letter representations of those sounds, okay? What are the two most common syllable patterns that spell long vowel sounds? 2, closed, open, or vowel consonant E? Someone said open, that's 1, and vowel consonant E. A closed syllable, 99.9% of the time, is going to be a short vowel sound, okay? So what is the closed syllables in these words? In the word sunset, how many closed syllables do we have? 2, sun and set. What about frozen? 1, Z-E-N, and what about in repeat? We have no closed syllables in repeat. We have an open and a vowel team. What letters spell the schwa sound? So in the word zebra, what letter? A, good job. Arena, A, both in the front and in the end, right? Arena. How about pilot? The O makes the sound in pilot. That's right. The schwa is always, always, always in the unaccented syllable. I've got this little koozie, and it says, be like the schwa, it's never stressed. I am so nerdy, like I totally love that. But you know, when you have to explain it to people, they're like, okay. What about these? Translate these phonemes into words. What's word number 1? K-N-E-E, good. And word number 2? Spell it for me. Q-U-I-T-E, good job. And the next one? Spell it. H-E-D-G-E, good job, good job. You guys have a very nice, I hope our friends online or virtually were taking that little test. There's more to that, but the bottom line is this. I go into a lot of schools and do some of these presentations. I do a lot of training with teachers. I'm involved right now in a training through pain education, working with teachers on this really deep-tiered program called Take Flight. And one of the things we do, first right out of the box, is we try to do a sound assessment. Because the thing we need to know is, and the thing children need to understand, is like the letter B does not say but. Would you agree? It is a small bounce. It is, and we articulate. What I tell teachers to tell their kids is, do it with a grin. But you can't when you've got a grin on your face. And what about D? What's it say? D. Good. What about P? It's just a puff. There's no voice. So most of the multisensory programs that teach a really strong phonics and phonological awareness, you have to use what I'll call pure sounds, okay? So that's just a little precursor. Let's jump into the next slide. All right, so appropriate instruction for struggling readers. Now, what about our ELL kids? Do you have very many second language learners in your area here that are true second language learners? We had a few. We had some Spanish-speaking kiddos, and then, of course, the kids involved in our Cherokee Immersion School became truly English language learners. But we know that this is an appropriate program for them as well. So it's quite comprehensive. So listen to what the International Reading Association describes a structured literacy program as. It says it's an approach which prepares students to decode words in an explicit and systematic manner. So I'm going to stop right there for a second. Explicit really means direct, and that we don't assume anything. We cover every piece of the language and decoding system. And then the other piece is it also is systematic. You know, every one of us has a system on how we do things. Let's take, for example, how you get up in the morning, get ready for school. Now, I don't know about you guys, but the first thing in my system is the coffee pot. I mean, usually that comes, I turn it on before I hit the bathroom. That's too much information. But you know what I mean? We all have a system. And so from there, you know, I have a little quiet time in my living room by the lamp. So everybody has a system. It's what's in place and how we get from point A to point B. So the notion that a good structured literacy program is systematic means again, it's highly predictable in that I do the same systems, it's just the content that changes, okay? So systematic. And it not only helps kids with dyslexia, but remember I just told you, there is substantial evidence that this type of teaching is more effective for every single reader. So the notion that we're just now, after 20, I don't know, 3 or 4 years with reading sufficiency, that we're just now getting programs in place for a good phonics and phonemic awareness is a little bit disturbing for me, because I feel like we could do some remediation before it ever becomes a problem. Does that make sense? Especially for these kids on the spectrum of mild to moderate dyslexia. All right, so going to the next one. Appropriate instruction for beginning readers or language learners begins with this. You guys are, I know you're probably sick of hearing this word, but frontline. You all are the front line in education. You're the frontline workers, right? So go ahead to the next slide. Sorry, I forgot to sign it. So you have to understand, the teacher has to understand language. You have to have a strong knowledge in what I called earlier the alphabetic principle. The understanding of how many sounds there are and what letters or graphemes make up those sounds. And then we have to have a really strong knowledge of what we call the orthographic patterns. That's the spelling patterns and the rules that govern those patterns in our language. You know, we used to think language was fairly simplistic. How many of you after today realize how complex the English language is? Most languages are. And then the other thing for struggling readers is every teacher needs that's going to work with them, including classroom teachers. Our goal is that he or she should have some training in this Orton-Gillingham method that we talked about earlier this morning. A multisensory language program is also one that incorporates, we said systematic, there's a system. It's cumulative, I told you I think earlier today, it builds upon itself in a nice layered fashion. Again, explicit, sequential sounds, syllables, talks about morphemes, which are the meaningful parts in words. And then the program should also teach sentence structure. What is a subject? What is a predicate? What words function in those areas? It seems superfluous. When I was younger, I was so good at diagramming sentences, but in college I was told that's ridiculous. Why would anyone need to diagram a sentence? When do you use that in your everyday life? Well, I don't know. When do you have an understanding of what a grapheme is in your everyday life? Once you learn to read. But these things are essential for language instruction. So now I know how important diagram, which just is a visual representation of the structure of a sentence, right? That's why we diagram. That's why we use, how many of you use graphic organizers in your room? Maybe a summary that has a beginning, middle, end. Maybe you do some semantic mapping. Here's the vocabulary word. Here's an illustration of what it might look like. Here's the part of speech it is, and then maybe this is what the meaning is, and maybe down here's a box with an opposite, an anonym for it. But we use those type of graphics to give us a visual representation because that helps the brain learn and remember. It's the same thing now that we understand with teaching a sentence structure, diagramming sentences. We also need to teach kids that paragraphs are basically made up of sentences that are wrapped around a main idea, right? And so many of the skills that we started kind of either slurring over in, if there's such a word as that, slurring over in our reading programs, need to come back to the forefront. And I think that getting the knowledge of why it's important is so important, don't you? And you guys are, this morning you kind of got the what is dyslexia and why do we need to know about it? And now you're getting the what do I do about it? But you're also getting a little bit about why does this work? Why is this a good program? Okay, let's go to the next slide. So when we think about what are the components of structured literacy, I talked a little bit earlier about what it looks like. I cannot express deeply enough or importantly enough how important, if you think of phonology, the understanding of sounds in our language, if you think of that as the foundation before we ever even teach phonics, because again, the notion of the letters that represent the sounds have to come after we understand the sounds, right? Now, it doesn't mean that if they never do pick up on a good phonological and phonemic cycle that we don't teach them the letters and sounds. It's just that's the foundation. And without a strong foundation, the house is very weak. So phonological awareness, so the difference is, think of it as like a big umbrella. And under phonological awareness might be concept of words. So it's like how many words are in the sentence, Tom ran home? 3. And then rhyming. And then syllables, deleting syllables. So say basket. Take off bass, what's left? Heck. Okay, so understanding that we can delete a syllable or blend. If I put these 2 syllables together, row, bot, what's my word? Robot, so blending of those. So all of that's under phonological awareness. But underneath there is all on that umbrella is also phonemic awareness. Now we're dealing with not just syllables and sentence and word parts, but now we're dealing with individual units of sound in our language. So this is so important because without the understanding of each unit of sound in our language, these kiddos that struggle with that auditorily, and I don't mean perceptually, but I mean as far as processing that, how hard is it going to be to try to attach a letter to an obscure piece of knowledge? They won't be able to remember that. That's why phonemic awareness is so important. Let's go into the next slide. So when we look at now, that's step 1, PA I call it, phonological or phonemic awareness. Step 2 is phonics or sound symbol association. Decoding is when we're able to break those sounds apart and then blend them back together to create a word meaning, a meaning of a word. And then encoding is breaking them apart to write the letter or letter representations that make those sounds. And then if you look at, it also includes things like blending those sounds together. How many of you, like I said today, this morning I was talking about kids that sound out words sound by sound. We very quickly want to move from sound by sound sounding out words into syllable chunks because that is a more efficient, more fluent way to be able to read. Because what if you get to the word fantastic and all you've got is sound by sound? This is what that sounds like. There's an A. Is that A, or is it I don't know. Did you know there's 5 sounds for the letter A? Oh, no. Kids don't even know when, why, how. What are they going to say?
I don't know.
Fan. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we lost one, you know. And so we need to teach them to blend rapidly. And for my severe kids that are on the moderate to severe end, I start with the vowel and move to the right. Then I go back a letter or a syllable once we can do that. Do you see what I'm saying? I start with that what we call rhyme, and I move toward the onset. So we've studied onset and rhyme. You all know what that is. We test for it. This is why. Some of these kids have to do it this way. Another caveat, let me throw this out there. I would like you to think about this. We teach kids in a multisensory structured language program that vowels are always open. It opens the mouth. They're not blocked. The sound and air is not blocked from coming out. It might be partially obscure a little bit like an ooh. It's still open though. Nothing's blocking the sound and the air from coming out. They're always open and vowels are always voiced. And one of the reasons we teach that is because it helps kids understand when we're talking about reading and decoding a word that we can actually, vowels are always kind of what we call continuants, like the short A sound. I don't just say ah, I can sing it ah and read it into the next sound. So we teach them how to do the slide. Say the word is cat. Start here with me with the vowel sound. At. Let's do it together. At. Now let's attach the k on the front. At. Now blend it. At. And I teach them, stretch it out. I get a rubber band and I show them how to stretch that rubber band out. At. Instead of k. At. When we do that, a lot of kids can't get past that break. Doesn't stretch into act very well. We have to make that happen. I tell them, don't stop, don't stop, don't stop. But in our speech and language world, there are these things called stops, and that's like
it'll distort the sound if you try to carry that on. So you have to jump rapidly into the vowel. But do the slide. So that'll help you when you start thinking about some of these, introducing some decoding to some of our strugglers or even our babies. And then the notion of segmenting those sounds and letters has to be addressed because I told you phonemic segmentation is the #1 indicator for future skilled readers. Now, what I tell families and teachers is that to be a skilled reader, you need to be a skilled reader at the word level. Because some kids, due to their high intelligence level, you can give them a connected text, like say a first grade story. They have just enough picture text match, just enough repetition, and just enough predictability that they can anticipate that vocabulary if they know just one of the sounds of the word. But that doesn't make them a skilled reader. At some point, very quickly, that's going to become unreliable, right? So we have to teach them that those sounds are there and they are very important, and even one letter. So you know, in the BLAST program, we start out teaching them that if we just had the sentence, the house is cold, if I change one letter in that whole sentence, in the word house, if I change the U to an R, guess what my sentence becomes? The horse is cold. So it changes the meaning completely. One letter in a string of 40 letters, or 20, however many that is. I'm horrible at math, but great at reading. Here we go, so go on to the next slide. So what does structured literacy look like? What are some other components? Well, I didn't bring my poster, but I have a big poster of a clover up in my room. And that clover represents the 6 syllable types, and I showed them to you this morning. Here they are. Repeat after me. Closed syllable. Open. Vowel consonant E. Vowel team. Vowel R. Final stable syllable. So that syllable is like the consonant LE, like in table, puzzle, or it could also be a TION or SION ending, like station and expression. Okay, so that's it. 6 syllable types in our language, but every bit of instruction in a multisensory structured language program is wrapped around the 6 syllable types. So that's what we're teaching. We are teaching syllables. So how do we explain to children what is a syllable? I want to go get that whiteboard so bad I can't stand myself, but I'm afraid it's a little wonky and I'll hit my toe. Notice how it's kind of tilted over there. So I told you that vowels are always what? Open and voiced. Put your hand right here on your throat. Make the A sound short A. Now E. You feel your voice moving? That's your larynx, that's your voice box. That's our motor, our voice motor box here. And so for kids, I ask them, is your motor running? Is it voiced or unvoiced? So we have to teach them that. And it's interesting, I didn't know this until I took the courses in structured language, that a lot of how we spell and how we sound out words has to do with whether the sound before it is voiced or unvoiced. Here's an example. Suffix ed, I told you earlier, is a morpheme, meaning it happened in the past, right? What are 3 ways we can say that suffix? Say the word is, sorry, I don't have a whiteboard, L-A-N-D-E-D. What's that word? Landed. What does suffix ed say there? Ed, or id, that's right. But what if I have the word jump and I put suffix ed? Now how's it pronounced? Jumped. That's right, we've got the t. Sounds like a T sound. And what if I have the word hum? Why? What's the difference, Pam? Well, let me tell you. When a word ends in a T or a D, we call those tongue tappers in my world, tongue tappers, it's going to say ed. Ed will be read ed. But if the voice in the base word, if the final sound is unvoiced, say the word jump. Now say, any voice going on there? Unvoiced. Then the tongue tapper will be unvoiced. Jumped. However, if the sound is voiced, as in the final sound in hum, say hum. What's the final sound? Feel your motor going? Now it's going to say the voice tongue tapper is D. So hummed. And when we teach kids that and give them an opportunity to practice that over and over, you'll get away from jumped it. He jumped it in the pond. How many of you have heard that? Oh my. My grandkids are starting to talk now, and it's so doggone cute till it's not. Their honey will help them. So, let me tell you what a syllable is. A syllable is a word or part of a word that has one vowel sound. Notice I didn't say vowel. It has one vowel sound. So, in my last name, Henley, we can do it like that. Because vowels are always open, it's one opening of the mouth. Henley. How many times did you see my chin drop? Henley. And until kids get the feel of that, I have them do this. Lay their elbows on the table and put their hands and say their name. And when that jaw pushes up, they're like, oh, I said, that's how many syllables you have. And they just are so fascinated. It's a pretty simple way to teach them that. One opening of the mouth. So that's what a syllable is. It's a word or part of a word with one opening of the mouth, which is caused by one vowel sound. And then clover, I just showed you. C is closed, L is L consonant, or L-E. O is open, V is vowel team, E is vowel consonant, E, and R is R control. That's the clover. Syllable division rules. Oh my goodness. When we can teach kids, and I think I brought some of my syllable division pages with me. When we can teach children the understanding that when we have a vowel consonant consonant vowel pattern, as in the word basket, that we can many times divide between the consonants, then that leaves them open to understanding the syllable. Does that make sense? Again, we got away from a lot of teaching these skills when we went with the, more progressive, holistic movement. For some kids, it works so great. But for these strugglers, and a lot of the kids, so I told you some of the schools I work with have 60% of their kids that's primarily, that are on the reading sufficiency plan, that's primarily due to the fact they don't have a strong phonics and phonemic program. They may be doing great things with comprehension, but again, can we comprehend what we cannot decode? Not unless it's told to us. So that's why this structured language looks the way it does. It's a highly structured, very repetitive program. Okay, next slide. So what else does a structured language program consist of? I talked a little bit about morphemes and morphology. The understanding of word pieces. It could be roots and affixes, most likely it is, but understanding what those mean. So like in the word dog, how many morphemes did we say? One morpheme. So a morpheme is one unit of meaning. But look at childish. How many morphemes? Hold up your fingers. What do you think? 2. That's right. What about visible? 2. Vis is Latin for to see, and IBLE is the Latin root for able to. You are able to see, it is visible. Okay? What about geologist? Now, how many morphemes? 3. Here they are. Geo means what? Earth. Earth. Geo means earth. Yeah. And ology, have you heard of ology? Means the study of. And suffix ist means one who does that. So if we teach this to kids, we don't have to just hope they can decode it and that it will make sense, contextually in the story or in the content that they're reading. And then what about hydrophobia? How many morphemes? 3. What are they? Hydro and phobe, which is fear. And when you have that suffix a or ia on the end, it means it is an actual noun. Now it turns it into a noun. So it is, instead of being hydrophobic or a hydrophobe, it's someone that is apparently afraid of water. hydro meaning water. Interesting. And here's the thing. Aren't those just, I mean, you don't have to be a nerd like me to love that, but don't you find that kind of interesting? Like the meanings of these words. Kids love this kind of stuff. And learning that and trying, then we love to make silly words. Once we learn a bunch of base words, roots, and affixes, then we make silly words, you know, out of geo, you know, hydro, geohydro, tractorous. I mean, you know, because track means to drag. I mean, these kids love to make that stuff up, and then they draw a picture of it all. So fun. But doing all that just helps them understand the English language. Next slide. So, we've talked about phonological phonemic awareness. We've talked about phonics and the structure of our language, or the morphemes, the morphemic analysis. And now comes grammar. And I love this picture. Punctuation saves lives. Let's eat grandma, or let's eat grandma. And so, kids, but here's the thing about that. We laugh about that. But I told you that the brain is hardwired to understand oral language. So if our reading doesn't functionally sound like oral language, they're going to have a hard time with comprehension even when they can decode those words. We have to teach them that we pause at commas, we stop at periods, we change the pitch of our voice for exclamation points and question marks. And quotation marks tell us someone is speaking. So that's what goes under, by the way, when I do it, talk to my kids. Every time we write or read a sentence, I tell them, hey, what is a sentence? And we do the whole thing. A sentence is a group of words that begins with a capital letter, ends with punctuation, subject, and then I say, we pause at commas, we stop at periods, change the pitch of our voice for question marks and exclamation points and quotation marks tell us someone is speaking. They need to understand the structure of our language. And then we're looking at grammar. Grammar became such a big deal in Shirley English. The one thing I had against Shirley, and I don't know her personally, but the one thing about Shirley English was a lot of teachers said, well, we didn't get to writing because that was in Unit 11. We need to be writing in conjunction with every single function of words that we learn. We need to be doing some writing. So if we teach them a subject and a predicate, we need to be writing that very same lesson, or at least in the same, within 24 hours of that. That's the whole hippocampus of the brain thing. And then teaching kids about sentence variation. You know, by the time they get into 2nd and 3rd grade, they can learn to use some subordinate clauses, you know, and some conjunctions. And then we need to teach them, obviously, about the mechanics of our language, capitalization, punctuation. Why is it important? Okay? Next slide. Structured language consists of semantics. Can y'all read that? So funny. She says, if I have 12 tomatoes and take away 2, what's the difference? And so our friend says, well, exactly, I don't like tomatoes either. I get it, what's the difference? Oh, what are you in for this time? And he says, semantics. I love that because I just think about how many times kids probably do get nuances of words so mixed up. Semantics is the meaning aspect of our language. So we need to understand, be able to comprehend at the sentence level, to move on to the paragraph, and then to a whole passage or book or text level. So take a look at this sentence that I have some gaps here. The elephant ate the blank at the blank of the trough. Let's just say Miss Henley had to give them the word trough, the student's trough. I want them to understand it has to be the word that's the correct part of speech, right? So if I have the word the before that blank, chances are, what kind of word does that need to be? Needs to be a noun, probably, unless there's an adjective in front of it. And then same at the bottom, I've got the. So let's fill that in. The elephant ate the what? Let me throw a word out there.
Peanuts.
Peanuts, where? At the blank of the trough. What would make sense there? Bottom. Okay. What if I had the word in the first blank? What if I had the letter, the elephant ate the, what if I had the letter H there? Now, peanut was the right part of speech, but does it match the letter I used? So now I'm having to rely on my phonics. And what if I just threw an obscure word out there and said, would it make sense if I said the elephant ate the running? The elephant ate the running. Running is a word. Does that make sense? Semantically, it doesn't make sense at all. And syntactically, grammar-wise, you're throwing out, instead of a noun, you're throwing out a verb. So all these little things that we kind of take for granted as good readers and good teachers are things kids need to be taught explicitly. The kind of word that needs to go there, we call that a noun. A noun names a person, a place, a thing, or an idea. We do tons of work with naming. We do a post office that I work with kids, and they have to put the word in the right post office box, whether it's a naming word, an action word, whether it's a word that describes something. So we have to do a lot of work with the parts of speech. But that's the notion. Next slide, if you would. Structured language consists of, I've said this before, I'll say it again, systematic and cumulative instruction. So it's logical and very sequential. In other words, we don't just randomly, and that's the problem with embedded learning, embedded phonics. Hey, if I've already taught a particular phonics skill though, and now I'm reading it in this, I'm using that to read this book, boy, draw them from here to there. That's what we should be doing. But let's not go backwards. Let's not introduce the book and have them try to read it and say, hey, you know what, we need this skill. Because I think that's what a lot of curriculums did for a long time. Structured language is cumulative. Like I said, it builds on concepts that they previously learned. And in fact, in a structured language program, we have a lot of decodable text that they can read, whether it's just sentences or passages or paragraphs, or even some of my programs have books that the kids can read that are decodable. When I was in college, I was taught that decodable was, naughty. Don't do decode, because we don't speak that way. I mean, we don't. It's a pretty contrived language, but it has to be for practice. Because what a decodable text says is, I am not going to ask students to spend cognitive energy trying to figure out words that I haven't taught them the skills to figure out. Does that make sense? For our struggling or our early readers, they need to spend as much cognitive energy as they can on what they've been taught. Then that makes sense. How many of you want to be tested over something you've never been taught? And when we ask them to read, that's what we're doing. Hey, we're testing your knowledge of something I've never told you. So that's why structured language is cumulative and why we use decodable text. Go on to the next slide, if you would. So, let's talk about, I used that word explicit. Another word is direct, and another word for it would be deliberate. It's the deliberate teaching of every concept that we can possibly teach in a span of time that will help them become skilled readers and spellers. In other words, it makes no assumptions. Like so many times, let's just take really great reading, for example. I love it. It is really great. But one of the early programs, and it starts out in really either late K for average readers or first grade, or even we use it in second grade for some of our intervention groups. But it starts out assuming kids know most of their consonant sounds, because it starts teaching the syllable types, and that's done through vowel, because notice that the syllable types are wrapped around the vowel sound. A syllable is a word or part of a word with one vowel sound. So some of these programs make some assumptions. So to have a complete program for your school, you need to start with teaching through a multisensory approach, the phonemic awareness and multisensory letter introduction. I'm going to show you what that looks like in just a sec. Let's get through the presentation. Okay, the next slide. So, I know that you guys, I think most elementary teachers are pretty good at diagnostic teaching. In other words, you see a problem and you teach to try to correct it. So, but when we look at that, we have to be very careful. When I say individualized instruction, I don't necessarily mean one-on-one. But you might have 5 kids in a class of 20, 4 or 5 students who need the same set of skills. So I'm not advocating that we put them over here in the turtle group, while over here the bluebirds are singing their song quite nicely. Certainly not, but I do say we might have these 5 who need that same skill. Could we differentiate? You all have heard of differentiated instruction. Could we differentiate and just work with them with 15 minutes on the skills that they need? So with STAR early literacy, I think it disaggregates it, right? It breaks it down, is that right? And shows you what skills. So that gives you an idea of where to start. But I will tell you, I will encourage you, and I don't know what y'all have. I don't know your programs at all. I know that Rita uses some of the Orton Gillingham really great reading materials. And are you all using any of that in your classrooms? So that might be something at least to look into if the funds become available. And here's why I say that is because then you quit making, we as the educated world, we quit making so many assumptions and we start covering. So the program before this is now called Countdown. And it's designed for regular kindergarten. But oh my gosh, I love it. And it's really particularly good for some of our first grade strugglers who might need a lower level. But I have some other programs that I will showcase for you today, and the components are what I want you to see, not necessarily, I'm not selling any of this, I don't get paid to sell any of this stuff. I'm just showing what the pieces look like. Okay, we also are looking at a careful continuous assessment. My gosh, you guys, we got this down. We assess kids to death. No, we just assess them. So what are we going to do with that assessment, though? Do we use it to drive our instruction? Do we use it to actually make these changes in language? And I go for mastery of skill. Like if there are 10 words, I don't call it mastery if it's 7 out of 10. For me, mastery is 10 out of 10. I think we develop mediocrity sometimes in allowing that. Now, does that mean I don't move on to a new skill if this kiddo's got one word that he's not getting on this 10-word list? No. But I'm going to come back and check that. I'm going to offer that. I'm going to keep teaching that and come back to that. Does that make sense? Okay, and then we want to teach toward what's called automaticity. Now, it's a little different than fluency. When we speak fluency, sometimes the education world thinks we need speed. Because that's kind of what we hook onto when we're checking fluency. How many of you do fluency screeners? How many words per minute? How many words correct per minute? And sometimes we completely leave out the notion of, is there proper intonation, expression? Do they pause at commas, stop at periods? You know, do they change the pitch of their voice at question marks and exclamation points? Do they talk as if under quotation marks like someone's speaking? And then, what about their phrasing? So think about this. Watch me talk to you for just a second. When I talk, I usually put 2, maybe 3, could be 4 or 5 words together, right? And that's how the brain is hardwired to understand language. I don't talk to you like this, just keep on talking, and there is no expression, I mean, y'all be dropping like flies if that's how I spoke. Sometimes my voice is quiet. Sometimes I'm fast, and sometimes I'm really slow. I want you to understand. Does that make sense? I mean, that's how our brains are created to understand language. So when we think about automaticity, we need to think about less about speed and more about appropriateness and what we call prosody. So one of the things that we teach our kids is we might read a sentence 3 times. Number 1 is for accuracy. That's when they code and read. They decode, and they read the word one at a time after they decode each word. Okay, that's for accuracy. The next thing we do is we look for phrasing. So we might take our pencil and loop 2 or 3 words, and I teach them what to loop together. You always put prepositional phrases together. In the house, at the store, under the box, whatever, those go together. Subject and verb can go together. The little boy, or the subject and verb can go together if there's not too many like adjectives before. If there are adjectives, the little boy, the little green mouse, what'd he do? A what? And so you put the verb and direct object together, or if it's a short one, the boy hit the ball, you can hook those together. So I teach them the appropriate ways to, we always bring our hook up at commas. We call it looping. We'll loop up at a comma because that means our voice needs to pause. So working on automaticity isn't just speed. I want to make sure you understand fluency isn't just speed. We're looking at accuracy, phrasing, and then what we call prosody. Now once we go through that, we practice saying the words, phrasing the words, now let's read it like we talk. So really, if you think about prosody or fluency, it's just putting together the language that sounds like I'm just talking to you. That's how our reading should sound. Okay? So go ahead to the next slide, if you would. What do we know about these kiddos with these that have learning difficulties? What about these 60% in one of the schools I was in that was struggling? They start thinking they don't get it. I'm not as smart as everyone else. I'm not as good as they are. So there's a social emotional aspect from not having the appropriate kind of instruction. So this is what Shagwitz says in her book. It says, parents and teachers of children with reading problems should make their #1 goal the preservation of their child's self-esteem. This is the area of greatest vulnerability for children who are dyslexic. So our goal as educators and the goal of parents of children with dyslexia is to preserve how they feel about themselves. And that's really tough because it's frustrating. How many of you have worked with kids like, I don't get what they don't get? I mean, I've been doing this particular, working with struggling readers most of my career, and I could feel myself getting frustrated with them. But I still knew they needed to know it's okay. And sometimes, I'm telling you, when they can't decode a word, I just give it to them. Not every time. I want them to practice those skills, but if they just can't do it, I just give it to them. And then we break it down together after I gave them the word. Okay, next slide. Listen to this. This comes straight out of this dyslexia handbook I showed you earlier. As early as 2nd grade, students who struggle as readers and who do not receive necessary identification, intervention, and support are being identified with these things. Anxiety, as early as 2nd grade, depression, and look at that, suicide. Can you imagine? I don't know. I mean, why is it a big deal that we know about this? Students who do not have the supportive environment of parents and educators who identify dyslexia, who provide the effective intervention, are more likely to struggle with those things. Can you believe? Think about how intertwined the self-esteem and what you think about yourself is intertwined. I mean, honestly and truly in elementary, all through school, kids, it seems, are defined by their ability, right? Particularly in school and in literacy. Okay, next slide. So why is it important that we know about all this? Okay, we're at the end. Now the fun can begin. So what I'd like to do, if it's okay, is to kind of showcase a few of these programs. Because what I'm actually showcasing isn't just the programs, but they are the procedures and the pieces that if you have some of these in your classroom, if you can begin to use a multi-sensory approach, and I'm going to show you what that might look like. Okay, so I'm going to first show you a couple of programs that are not our deepest tier programs. So here at Cherokee, for interventions, is that right, Rita? You're using some really great reading programs. And this program is called the BLAST program. So I'll just take you to one of the lessons and tell you the components. The very first component, and they have an online, Rita, I wonder if you could go back to our friend technology and pull up, use your password if you can, and pull up maybe Unit 6 on BLAST. And I want to show them kind of what that looks like. But I'll tell you first, you know, you learn only about 10%, right, of what you hear or see, maybe, and it's 20% of what you hear. But if you do it, you learn a whole lot more together. So let me take you through a little piece of this. So in these programs, and again, I don't work for Really Great Reading, although I think I should get a commission, because I have really tried to encourage and have helped probably 20 schools over Northeast Oklahoma implement this. So what I will tell you about Really Great Reading is that it was designed primarily for kids with dyslexia. And the owner of the company, his son is dyslexic, and he lived in the Northeast, I think Connecticut. And what I found out was one of the ladies there, that's one of the consultants, she and I became buds over the time we used it. She told me, she said, he could not find an appropriate intervention for his son in their area of the state. And so this dad apparently had some cash, and so he hired some experts and some specialists to create a program designed specifically for students with learning differences in reading and literacy. So how it starts out, I told you that this level begins with the assumption that they're pretty strong with their consonants, consonant letters, and sounds. Now, it will reinforce it repeatedly. And how it does that is in this manner. Well, I'll get to that in a minute, but I'll tell you the very first piece of the pie is just letters and sounds. So it does go over, it'll pull up. You have to have, and it's $90, it's not very expensive for a whole year. You get this little online component. I'm going to show you what that looks like. Could you do it without this online component? You could, but man, for the money, it is so beneficial. So it will rapidly show them a letter, and then the screen shifts, and it has it between the two ears. You know, that's the sound boxes, so they understand quite quickly that I want you to give me the name of the letter and the sound. I told you this morning there's 4 properties to a letter, right? The name, the shape, the feel, and the sound. So that's what a good Orton-Billingham program will help kids learn, is the name, the shape, and the feel, and the sound of all the letters, and how to blend them together and unblend them to decode words and spell. So the first part of the lesson is this letter, sound, work, and then also sight words, which they call heart words. And so when the kids learn these, they pop up there rapidly, but the teacher controls how rapid that recognition is. And a lot of it is just saying the words with them, and then you can go back through it again where they say them on their own. You can do it as a whole class, or a whole group rather, whereby the kids don't have to feel intimidated if they don't know it. Everybody gets the opportunity just to say it. You know, little Larry is over there like Susie or any overachievers going, that was said, and he's like, that was said. But he begins to form an image of it in his brain in this word form area. That's the place in the brain where if it sees it, that part of the brain sees it, hears it, and says it enough, it forms a solid foundation as a whole word. How many of you have to sound out very much of what you read now? We really don't. The only time I have to sound out something is if I'm reading a medicine bottle, right? You know, it's like 18 syllables. And so you're having to try to figure out what this is. And specifically if it's generic medication, we're in trouble. But, okay, thank you. So here's the very first part. So are we on lesson, what lesson are we on? 6? Okay, so we do this thing where it's called look, think, say. So when every time, so go ahead and click it, look. Okay, that's where we teach our kids to do this. Now, I will say, we started doing this with intervention groups and age-appropriate classrooms, and our reading scores just blew up. They got so much better, because I told you this is also appropriate for our early childhood learners. Look, it looks like this. When it goes yellow, you think, and then when it goes green, you say the letter. Say the name of the letter. Okay, now, click again, and you're going to give me the sound. The sound is... And this first one is just that practice. Okay, Rita, go on up to the arrow over here on the left. Yep. And now this one is just called letter sound pop-up. So let's do it together. Say the letter. V, N, go. B, V, C. And so Rita's back there controlling it, or someone's controlling how quickly that goes. You, as the instructor, get to, click your mouse. Then you can give me the sounds, okay? So this is called letter sound 3 up. Look, click, think. I want you to tell me the name of the letters. Go. Good. And you want to teach them to do that rapidly. Remember how rapid automatic naming becomes very important? V, K, C. And then the next one, let's just give me the sounds. Okay? And by the way, it teaches before. It's more common and frequency. Okay, going up to the arrow, Rita. Yep, click. Now this is called 3 in a row, or read a row. Now listen to what this is teaching. We're really rapidly getting into, now listen to me, if you don't have this, you just write these letters on the board and erase as you go. These activities are not just for this program. I'm doing them online. Lots of teachers, I know some friends in my town who said, my school isn't able to get this for me, so I implemented it on my own. So this is what they do. WVC, VWB, WKC. What am I working on? I'm looping. Do you hear me doing it? I'm phrasing. Go to the next one. Maybe I want them to do just sounds. If they're pretty good at the name of the letter, I might work on sounds. V, k, n, k, w, k, k, w, k. So, sounds funky. But the kids love it. And listen, this is the skill and drill that is building the neural pathways and getting them those 500 to 1,500 exposures. Okay, here's heart word pop-up. Look, everybody look. Think. Say the word. Sounds easy to us, but I tell you, our kindergarten and first grade kiddos, especially our strugglers, they may struggle with that. We just give them the word. The word is as. Tell me the word. As. Okay? Thank goodness we know that when there's a vowel sound before the letter S by itself, says Z and not S. Just so you'll know. Next word. Look, think, say. With. Good. Okay, go back to the arrow. The next part, and guys, this is all just lesson number 1, but it's this fast. And the kids, by the time they're at Unit 6, they have the procedures down. So all throughout these programs, every single Gillingham program, the procedures never change. What changes are the concepts, okay? But they know the procedures so well, it's the safety net for them. All right, so this is 3 in a row. Look, think, say. If, was, with. Okay, go back to the arrow. And now this is the heart word through, read a row. Here we go, let's read it together, go. As, they, his, if, on, as, this, his, with. We are working and building automaticity and fluency right here with this activity, with just at the word level. Does this make sense? Would you have to have this program? If you've got a good list of sight words for your kids, start with those on your board. And just write them out that morning, and maybe when they come in from the for bell work, they could do that together with you. These programs are awesome in that, I tell you what's the most expensive thing about this daggum program are these books right here. So I use these at Crossroads Learning, and these are about, gosh, help me out, Rita, $200 a piece, is that about right? Okay. And those are expensive, but I tell you, they've lasted me, Center's been open 4 years, and I used one of my books 3 years before that. So they've lasted a long time, so that'll hold. Okay, let's go ahead and jump over to the home and go to lesson 2. Go ahead, stay on unit 6. And just buzz down here, yeah, lesson 2. So listen to how the phonemic awareness works. So go ahead and click on that, and what you're going to get, oh, now by the way, it repeats a lot of these things every day to get in that practice, and literally this part takes about 5 minutes. So it's daily, repeated practice. But then it gets into the PA. Go ahead over to your arrow. Yeah, keep going, arrow, arrow, till you get to the posters. Okay, we'll watch this guy.
Let's quickly review the short O phoneme and movement. The short O phoneme is ah, and it's the first phoneme we hear in the word octopus. For the movement, hold your hand over your head. Pretend your hand is an octopus swimming while saying ah, ah. Remember, you can use the posters to check if a vowel phoneme is short or long.
So their animation isn't like rainbows and bunnies, but it's important animation to help teach the specific skill. Can a teacher do
Let's
this?
review the long
Of course, but you're going to have the knowledge to be able to do it. So the next thing that should pop up, go ahead and go over to the arrow. Yeah, should be the posters. Yep, so there they are. So listen to the phonemic piece in here. So I'm going to help me finger stretch. So if you have a good list of words with the skills that you need, so take your left hand and put it under your chin right here on your chest. So repeat this word after me, okay? We're going to listen for words that have the short O phoneme, which is ah. Did you notice how she sang it? If you can get in the habit of singing those phonemes, it really helps our struggling readers blend it into the final sounds. Okay, so the first word is hop. Echo that word with me. Hop. Now we're going to stretch it. Ah. Hop. How many phonemes? 3. What's our vowel phoneme? Ah. Is that long or short? short, and we've taught them in previous lessons that that's because it's in a closed syllable. It's short, and we know it's short. The poster says, I know the phoneme ah is short because ah is the first phoneme in octopus. So this is repetitive work with the phonemic awareness. Now go ahead and go hit your arrow, and that should take you to lesson 3, and click, and this should be a phonics lesson. So we'll look at this real quick.
In a previous lesson, we learned about digraphs. Digraphs are 2 letters together that spell one sound.
You already know the digraph SH. It makes the sound sh, like the sound you would make if you were asking someone to be quiet. Remember, the digraph SH has its own letter tile with the S and H together because digraphs make a single sound, even though there are 2 letters. Today, we are going to learn about another digraph, the digraph TH.
In a digraph TH, the T and the H work together to spell the sound. You can hear this sound at the beginning of the word thumb. Now listen closely for the sound at the beginning of these words. Think, thin. We can also hear the digraph at the end of the words, like month and path. In these words, the sound is spelled with the digraph TH.
The T and H are together on one letter tile for the digraph TH because the digraph TH makes a single sound. When we see the digraph TH in words, we will say only one sound. Let's examine some words with this new digraph and practice reading them. Remember, the digraph TH can come at the beginning or the end of words. It can also come in the middle of longer words. Look at the word thin. I see the digraph TH at the beginning of this word. Thin has 4 letters, but just 3 sounds. F, I, N, thin. The digraph TH is making a single sound at the beginning of the word.
Where is the digraph TH in the word with? This time it's at the end of the word. With has 4 letters but only 3 phonemes. If, with. The digraph TH at the end makes a single sound. Now let's try spelling a word with the digraph TH. How would we spell the word math? As in, I studied hard for the math test today.
First, we need to finger stretch the word. Math. M-A-Th. Math.
What is the first phoneme? What letter spells
The letter M.
What is the next phoneme?
A.
What letter spells a?
The letter A.
What is the last phoneme you hear? What letters spell?
The digraph TH. M-A-Th. Math. Math has 4 letters but only 3 sounds because the digraph TH spells a single sound at the end of the word.
Remember, digraphs make only one sound even though there are 2 letters. When you see the digraph TH, it makes the sound you hear at the beginning of the word thumb.
So then it says, now work with your teacher to build and read other words. So let's take a look at this first word. So all of the kids, where did we go? Yeah, there we go. Is that it? So all of the students have a board. Now, there's nothing special about this board. You can cut out letter tiles. You can get them in, off Teachers Pay Teachers, you can find some letter tiles that you can make out of cardstock. The thing that's special about these is that it's magnetic because they have this magnetic working board. So this is their holding board. And the thing I like the most is that the vowels are red and the consonants are black because that gives them some differentiation and understand that. We also know that the vowel sounds are represented over here, so instead of finger stretching as they're building words, instead of doing it with this, they're doing it with these. When I went virtual with my kids that were on the BLAST program in March, when we went all virtual with all of our kids, what we did was I sent them out. I didn't have enough of these because I just have 1 or 2 for each of our academic language therapists or instructors. So we couldn't send them home. So I just made cardstock letter tiles and gave the teachers, because we also didn't have enough teachers' editions to go around at the time, yet I ordered more. So what I did was gave them the list of words from each of the lessons, and the teachers built their own lessons, and the kids used the cardstock. I just put them in a baggie, cut them up, put them in a baggie. I just made the vowels a different color so they could differentiate. And then I set them colored squares. So this is how this looks. So the first word is, and it follows the gradual release method. I do, we do, and you do. So the first word is the word thin. Say thin. Now when we stretch it out, I'm going to lay this down and hold this. When we stretch it out, we start with our color tiles. This is just the sound tiles. It, Now we go back and say, now what letters make those sounds when I have, what do I need? My digraph's at the bottom. So digraph TH, it, what vowel letter makes that sound? I, notice it's red along with the red tile, and then And then we do this method, and I want to encourage you to try this in your classrooms. Touch and say. In, thin. Now I like them to sing it. In, thin. That blends it a lot more readily for some of my kiddos. Some of them can segment, but many of them need to stretch and blend, okay? And then there's just several words that they do in that order. How many of you think that's pretty doable? I mean, you don't have to have these programs, but I wanted you to see the components of them. Now, the other piece of this I like, and honestly, I don't know about you guys read it, but I buy one workbook and I make copies of it, and they told me it was just fine. I'm not breaking copyright rules. So, Rita, if you would go to lesson 4. Yeah, there we go. Lesson 4. So this is our phonics practice. So every kiddo has workbook pages for every single unit. And when I was in the public schools, we had, like I told you, we did a WIN program. So if I had kindergartners who were advanced, they were in this program. Our regular classroom first graders, if they were on level, they got the BLAST program, the same program. And some of our second graders who were needed intervention, we got them in groups of 6 or less, and we did this program with them at their pace. Does that make sense? We just divided them. I mean, we found broom closets, and we used I trained our reading assistants, and because this program, you do need some background, you do need some training, but after the training, it's following the script. I'm not going to tell you it's easy, but it's fairly simple to do that. And that really made a difference. But if you were in the regular classroom and you're working with an intervention group, and I don't know what this year's going to look like with centers with COVID, but I will say, if the kids are doing independent work, you could do a small group intervention with something similar to this, as long as it followed these important pieces of multisensory structure. Is it multisensory? We have tactile. I went a step ahead, and my students at Crossroads, they write the word over here. And I'm going to tell you this. In second grade, the beginning of second grade, we teach them structured cursive writing. There's a lot of rationale behind that, but I will tell you this. How many of you know that these reversals that these kiddos have with B and D, you can virtually end those very quickly with cursive writing, because the approach stroke, there's only 4 approach strokes in cursive writing, and B has this one, the curve way up loop left, and D has the curve under over stop. So that we train them to use that language, say the language of the approach stroke when you build that letter. And I will tell you, within just a few short weeks, the B and D reversals, not only in writing, but they begin to disappear because we write cursive over print and how we cover up those letters. And it's just amazing how quickly the brain can be trained to overcome some of those reversals. So by the time they get to each unit has 5 lessons. It's designed to do about 20 minutes a day, each lesson. So Monday through Friday, 20 minutes. But when they get to lesson 4 of a unit, this is unit 6, then they're going to practice using, decoding, reading, and spelling words that have this exact component that they've just been taught. So here, this little activity is called Mark It, and they just put an under each sound and they say hot, hot. So it's the touch and say, only they're underlining each. Now notice that digraph TH has one line under it because it's one sound unit. So we're teaching phonemes and graphemes that represent those sounds. This is the notion of what a structured multisensory language program needs to look like. Is it easier to buy a ready-made program? Oh my gosh, yes. But you know, we teachers have been creative our whole careers, haven't we? I mean, we have reinvented the wheel so many times. This was not hard to recreate when we went virtual. So, you know, God forbid you should have to do it. These are things we could set home quite readily, not the boards, but the little construction paper or cardstock letter tiles. Just adding that component of the physical, tactile, and kinesthetic. Now, let me also add this to your teaching, particularly for strugglers, but honestly for any learner of the English language. I would encourage you to teach handwriting right along with reviewing or teaching the letter names and the sounds and the shape and the feel. Because here's what's going to happen. Let me take you. Thank you, Rita. Thank you guys so much. By the way, lesson 5 is just the spelling portion of this, and you read some different phrases and sentences that go along, decodable sentences and phrases that go right along with the lessons they've had up to that point. There's the cumulative piece. Okay? Thanks, Rita. That's great. Now I want to show you some pieces of some other little programs. Now, there are trainings happening all over the state with these programs. I know that out of Payne Education Center in Oklahoma City, they can do some of these. There are scholarships available. Some of them are really good scholarships. They cover like up to 50 to 75% of the tuition for these programs. But I would encourage you just to look into them and kind of see what they look like maybe someday. And I tell you, some of the schools have contacted me and said, we had some COVID funds. Can we have some training? And I thought that was great because they were able to use some of that funding. So the next program I'll show you is our seminal program, and it's called Take Flight out of Texas Scottish Rite Hospital. And it's a similar situation. It teaches in the very same manner, multisensory structure. But it also has some components to it that I think are great, and many early childhood classrooms are already equipped with these pieces. So let me show you these. I'm sorry to my friends in the virtual world, I'm going to have to lay this down, but I'll try to yell. That'd be fine, Rita. Although I'm not very good at staying on flies. Okay. The thing that this program does, I'm going to show you, this is just the very first lesson. So notice the components. We always start out with an alphabet component. So in the alphabet, we're teaching them a lot about left, right, before, after, because did you remember what I told you about the letter C? When the letter C, the letters that come after that are followed by an E, I, or Y, it makes the S. Well, there's a lot of spelling or orthographic patterns that are dependent on what comes before or after the letters. So some of our strugglers don't understand before and after. They don't understand left and right. So we teach them this little warm-up. My left hand is my before hand, my right hand is my after hand. A is the initial letter, Z is the final letter. M and N are the two middle letters of the alphabet. All the letters between A and Z are called medial. So in other words, they're not middle letters, they're medial. They don't include initial and final. Because a lot of spelling and orthographic patterns depend on where in the word that they fall. Is it in the initial, medial, or final position of a word? That's how that's spelled. So when we spell the long E sound, say like in the word feet, not like 85% of the time, it's spelled digraph EE when it falls in the medial position. But if it's in the ending, if it's in the final position, it also spelled with digraph EE, but if we hear a vowel consonant E, that comes less frequently, like in the word theme or athlete. So we teach them this warm-up. My beforehand is my left hand, after hand is my right hand, A is the initial letter, Z is the final letter, M and N are the two middle letters, all the letters A and Z are called medial. There are, we give them a chance to count, 26 letters in the alphabet. There's two kinds of letters, vowels and consonants. Because we start teaching the syllable types based on vowels in a closed syllable. We teach them a closed syllable is one vowel followed by one or more consonants, or that comes before one or more. And then they touch and name. And they use their beforehand to touch and name the alphabet from A through M, and their after fingers to touch and name the alphabet N through Z. All of these sound very superfluous, like, oh, wait, that doesn't really matter. I mean, any way you touch them, but it's the procedures and the components of it that matter. So if you have an alphabet strip or just letters of the alphabet, you can just lay those out and go through that same. I'm happy to give you a copy of that one. I can send it to you digitally. The other thing that this teaches is something called multisensory letter introduction. So, for example, it always starts out with an auditory discovery. So, repeat these words after me, please. Pat, pig, pet. What sound did you hear like in those words? I heard. So then they all have a mirror, and we ask them. And if you can get your hands on any mirrors, I tell you, these come from Payne Education. I think they're only $1.50 a piece. You only need 4 or 5 if you're going to have a small group, or just go buy some. Or I don't put it on your list of things you want kids to bring. Handy wipes, Clorox wipes, and oh, by the way, can they bring a little mirror? Because they need to look at their mouth. What's my mouth doing when I make that sound? Because that's one of the features of a letter that they need to learn, the feel. What's it feel like? What's it sound like? Okay? And so we take them through, and then there's always, I give them the name of the grapheme where the letter is P, and I give them a little riddle to come up with the key word to help them remember that sound. So this is a picture of an animal that has short legs and a snout and a curly tail. If you think you know it, put your hand up right here on your head. In a children's story, one of these 3 animals outwitted the big bad wolf. I see your hand right up there. What is it, babe? It's a pig. So the name of the letter is P. The key word is pig, and the sound is P. I'm going to give you the name of the letter. You give me the key word and sound. Ready? P. Pig. Again. P. Pig. P. Pig. Notice the repetition. And let me tell you, from lesson 1 through lesson 99, we follow these same procedures. There are actually 132 lessons in the Take Flight program, but the graphics are represented in the first 99. And then by the time they get to books 6 and 7, it's Latin and Greek, roads and combined language. So it sounds like, oh my God, do the kids get bored? You know what? Our struggling learners, I use the same program on teaching some of our 5-year-olds to read. So now that COVID has hit, I don't know, job security for me, I guess, but a lot of the parents have stayed virtual, so they're calling us to do some one-on-one lessons with their kids. They just feel comfortable coming into the center one-on-one. I'm doing these same programs with our beginning learners and readers as I do with our dyslexic kiddos. The components in this program, also they have the keywords and sounds, so they go over those. And then we also do a phonemic awareness with our sound trace. So as we learn the letter P and the sound is P, they learn these little pictures. They come from, originally, they're fashioned after a publisher called Linda Moon Bell, and they all have a name. So this is a lip puffer, and we teach them whether it's voiced or unvoiced. So is the sound voiced or unvoiced? It's unvoiced, but it has this brother letter that's a cognate, and I showed it to you earlier, and it's this sound. So we have unvoiced lip puffer, voiced lip puffer, and then they use these, once they fill up partially their tray, as long as we start getting a vowel in there, then we can use these sound trays to help us build and spell words similarly to what we did here. So what we have to do is put it on a magnetic board, and so the kids pull theirs down. I have big ones on my board, and so say the word is, starting off, maybe the word is pig. So this is what that would look like. touch and spell. Pig, P-I-G, and then they write it cursive, P-I-G. What I wanted you to notice about these programs is they are visual, very auditory, and we do it simultaneously. Because the research behind how the brain learns says that simultaneous oral spelling and working on sounds like the name of the letter is P, the keyword sound P, those components are the same components that Orton and Gillingham, listen, were doing almost 100 years ago. Funny how things ebb and flow in the education. Funny how things ebb and flow in the education world. Thank you. I'd love to forget this thing. The other components, remember I told you kids need a visual behind even instructions. So I showed you the 6-syllable types. Let me show you when kids are spelling derivatives. A derivative is a base word plus a suffix. So when kids are spelling derivatives, look at all the processes. This is the procedure chart they've learned. This is what it looks like. Look and listen, echo, unblend and pull down your sound pictures, identify the base word, spell the suffix, make a decision, because eventually kids are going to learn. Would you guys just overlook it if I groan when I bend down here, because I think I shared with you my back is toast. Eventually kids learn when adding a consonant suffix to a base word, we just add, as in the word bigness. And they do this. We just add, as in the word, and the kids say bigness. And this is when adding a vowel suffix to a base word containing 2 adjacent vowels, we just add, as in the words seeing and cooking. When adding a vowel suffix to a base word ending in 2 consonants, just add, as in the word standing. Now, I'm just doing this flippantly, but we've spent 1 or 2 or 3 whole lessons on what the discovery of what this looks like and why would this be important. Because what you're training them to do is, hey, you know what? Sometimes we add a vowel suffix like ing or ed to a base word that ends in an accented 1 vowel, 1 consonant. Guess what? Now we make an X out of our hands. Do that with me and say double the final consonant and add the suffix. Have you ever wondered why is the letter N doubled in beginning but not in happening? I mean, am I the only nerd who's like, why is that? Probably so. But here, I'm going to tell you. Because I teach that in this particular, these are called word spelling formulas or derivative rules, that when we add a vowel suffix to a base word over here, ending in an accented 1 vowel, 1 consonant, really great reading calls it the 1-1-1 doubling rule, it has to be accented. Well, who knew that? But in the word happening, the accent is on the first syllable, whereas in beginning, it's on begin, it's on the second syllable. So little nuances like that, but I will tell you this, I'm going to give you a publisher's name, a guy that if you cannot get any of this material, and you're going to make it up on your own, and you're like, okay, Henley, what about a scope and sequence? I'm going to give you a name. David Kilpatrick, and he has written a couple of fairly inexpensive books. They're like little guides to help you with scope and sequences and activities and word lists, because that's the thing with all this curriculum is you don't have to go find the word list, but if you had them on your own and you had a few little extra materials, boom, suddenly your classroom can start becoming a structured multisensory instructional classroom. And I want to encourage you all to add one little piece at a time. So maybe you want to add the handwriting to it. If you are in first grade in kindergarten and second, if you guys don't have a handwriting cursive curriculum for second, go ahead and just do a review of all the names of the letters while skywriting them. You don't have, there are some words, verbiage that you could use, but you could make it up on your own. I, pull straight down, dot. O, curve over, around, close. Curve left, over, around, close. So what I would encourage you is if you're in the lower elementary, those would be good components that you can add for free when you're reviewing the name of the letters. Remember the 4 components of a letter: the name, the shape, the feel, and the sound, and try to incorporate those as much as you can. Dig around and somebody, if there's, do y'all have just like a junk closet? I can tell you how many cool things I found in the junk closets over my years. Or like a classroom no one's using, it's like that becomes the dumping pile. I don't know now. Is your principal in here? Okay, sorry.
I know where it is.
Okay, sister knows where it is. Okay. I'm going to tell you, if there's some old people's junk, you know, one person's junk's another teacher's treasure. Find some old cards like this and see if you can start matching them up, and you can print these. Here's the font I'm going to encourage you to use is serif, any of the serifs on your computer. Here's why, because they're the most common in books. But when we teach the letter, I teach them what the actual print or cursive letter looks over a serif. So I draw the serif to the best of my horrible ability on the board. And then I show them for cursive, it's cursive over print, what it looks like. I have an entire rationale. If you are interested, I'll leave my contact information. Rita has it. You can email me. I will send you digitally anything I have to help you all get started on this. But let's just say, for the love of the Lord, there was just a tiny bit of money available for training. The problem with really great reading is you are going to need a little bit of training. I dare say, I bet. I know you've got all kinds of time, Rita, but I bet Rita could train you. But I would encourage you to just grab you a teacher's edition. And I will tell you, maybe you could do a little, I don't know, readathon fundraiser. These little kits, they now come in wonderful boxes, not these horrible bags, but these little kits I think are about 55 or 60 bucks a kit. If you're just getting enough for a group at your table, you can get away with 4 or 5. And I encourage you. I love really great reading, but I've really gone around the state and tried to encourage schools and administrators. They said, what could we do to help? And I love the heart of an administrator who says that to me. Pam, what can we do to help this bottom quartile? What can we do? I mean, I know altruistically it's not just entirely that altruistic, like, oh, we just want to help these poor strugglers, and they do. But they also want to get those test scores up, too. I get that. And I tell them, get you at least 1 or 2 people in your building, in your district for sure, trained in this Orton Gillingham program called Really Great Read, Take Flight. And it's a 2-year thing, and it's hard, it's not easy, it's a master level. And after next summer, it will require a master's degree to be able to get it. You come away with something called the Certified Academic Language Therapy Certification. And it's just the knowledge that you learn, and then the structure of the programs that are so good. But within that, they have other programs that are not as deep tiered, and this is from Payne Education. And one of those is called Structured Language Basics, SLB. And some of you may have heard of that. Like a lot of, I say that, you're like, oh, I had that training years ago. It's still a great training. They've perfected some things and made it a little more, a little easier and a little more accessible. But they have one for kindergarten called Navigate Kindergarten, one for first grade called First Grade Foundations. Now, I will say, up until June, I did not work for Payne Education, but in June I started doing some contract work with Payne teaching this because I lost my mind and decided to get my 2-year another certification called Qualified Instructors. And I'm through. I'm not going back to school. I swear I'm done. My husband looks at me like, yeah, right. What I'll tell you is these programs have every component I've just shown you that you just saw, and that what we know works best for struggling learners. So I've got tons of more things to show you, but I feel like you guys are about done. But let me ask you this. Do you all have some questions, like practical questions, how to get started, or what pieces, if you could only do this, what would, do you have any questions? Yes?
What kind of assessment do you give, like at the beginning, like a pre-assessment?
Okay, I'm glad you talked. Oh, I was going to go back. Ooh, I lied to y'all earlier. So my pre-assessments that I gave when I was in public school look very similar to what I give now. And the name of this, there's a book called Core, C-O-R-E, Multiple Measures. It cost me $40, and it has been the best assessment. I give the phonological and phonemic awareness assessment pieces. They're grade level benchmarked in the book. Isn't that awesome? And this is a diagnostic, okay? So you can do your screeners. You guys are okay on screeners, but for a diagnostic, I use that also. There's one called the deletion, phoneme deletion. I do that assessment. I, of course, do the phonics survey, which is give me the name of these letters, tell me the sounds they make, you know, just your basic. How many of you were ever trained in literacy first?
That's what we've been using.
Okay, love literacy first. So core, and have any of you done dibbles? So core, to me, takes the best of literacy first and the best of dibbles and blends them together.
We also have access, I mean, we do all the really great readings.
Now
We have
those,
the foundation survey and the
Right.
pre-foundation survey and all of that. We have access to all that too.
so those are great. No, they're great. They're great. Just look at the components. The thing I would add, though, is a deletion. Because none of them do a deletion, a phoneme deletion. So in other words, like I told you today, say the word cat, take off k. What have you got? At. And then delete the final sound. Say the word bake. Say it for me. Take off k. Let's look. Bay. So then that's a first grade, and it's really simple. But now I want to tell you, to me, mastery is all. So they only test 5 on this particular piece, the deletion piece. Mastery is all 5. Now, does that say if a kid gets 4 out of 5, they have dyslexia? No. Remember to triangulate. Get at least 3 or 4 good pieces before you start thinking maybe. And then I'm going to take you to the profile in here, and I'll share that with you in a minute. So, does that help you? So I always give a phonological and a phonemic awareness. Now, I love to know about rhyming and all of that, but I must know about their ability to segment phonemes, blast, and I need to know their ability to blend the phonemes. So if I say this word, plaint, they need to be able to put that back together. Now, again, it's a great little benchmark. That's a good question. I also do a developmental reading assessment where they read a connected text, and I listen to how they go about the reading. What's their prosody? What's their fluency? I do an oral reading fluency on them. I do a vocabulary screener. The core is the only one that I've seen, assessment that I've seen that has a vocabulary screener. Now, I don't know. STAR is a vocabulary and comprehension kind of together, but it doesn't just take those apart. You know what I mean? It doesn't, you just kind of put them all together. And then I do a comprehension where they have to do some writing. I also give, how many of you are familiar with the Words Their Way spelling assessments? I give that Words Their Way spelling assessment grade level appropriate. So either primary, elementary, or intermediate. Sounds like a lot of assessments. My assessments for the children that come to me, these are kids who have had interventions usually over a year, sometimes 3 years. And the parents, I wish I'd done this sooner. And the sad thing is I wish they had 2. Because we went 3 years really struggling. But when they come see me, it takes me about 45 minutes to an hour to do a battery of assessments on a kid that I feel like is probably dyslexic. And then I do a write-up that's real clinical, you know, assessor noted, that kind of thing. And then I meet with the parent for an hour and explain every piece and indicators for dyslexia. So I left out on your table, I left you guys some papers that were checklists. Did you all get those? They came out of the dyslexia handbook. That's a great question. Do we have any more questions? Okay.
I was just going to ask about Words Their Way. Would you use that kind of like a guide to coincide with what you're teaching in your guided reading group? Like
So
the
we,
phonics, you know. what
yeah, in your
have.
phonics group, yeah. So if you can relate it to the phonics instruction. So think about it. See what we saw with really great reading. They introduced these letters and sounds to decode words, and then we use them to spell and build words on our word board, right? So we need to think of that in the same manner. The Words Their Way pieces, and it gives you at what level to start them. And honestly, I ordered off eBay. I ordered some $3 books that coincided with the words their way, and it gave me word sorts. How many of you do a word sort? Oh, I love word sorts. It's just word study. Really, they're really studying. But you can get them for cheap. I mean, they're like $3, and you just get list after list after list that the kids can cut out and put in categories. So they're just sorting according to both the phonemic and the orthographic pattern. So both the sound pattern and the spelling pattern, which is ultimately where you're headed with. But the thing about words their way is it kind of gives you the level of where their need is. So it's an assessment that I say is absolutely perfect. And that is what I always based when I was in the public schools. That's how I wanted my kids to be, and the teachers I worked with, I asked them to develop at least 2 spelling groups around that words their way assessment. Because we're never going to teach kids to spell every word in the English language. But if we could teach them to be able to examine them and tell them why words are spelled the way they are. Why do we double the letters on some and not on others? Well, it depends on 2 checkpoints. One, is it a vowel or a consonant suffix? Is it ed or just s or ness, like, wordness or bigness, okay? Or what are the components from the vowel to the end of the word? That makes a difference. All these derivative rules, you can find them on the web. You can find them. If you cannot, let me know. I can't make you any copies of these because they're copyright, and I would never break copyright. If I ever go to jail, that'll be what she did. She's only copied 1 book too many. But anyway, I can get you the information on that. But Words Their Way is a great spelling assessment. And remember, it's a spelling features. We're not looking at just right or wrong, did they get 10 out of 20? We want to know what pieces are they struggling with orthographically. Matching the letter sounds, the letters and sounds. It's a great question. But I do that component because it helps me know whether we're dealing with a deeper form of dyslexia with a different piece of it called dysgraphia. Plus I get a handwriting sample, and that can tell me a lot. So, great questions. Any others? How about our friends from nothing?
They haven't sent me anything.
Come on, guys, we'll wait on you. Okay, so I have these pieces up here. If you all want to come and look at them, social distancing, of course. And then I have plenty more. I have a ton of things we could have gone over, but I think that if it's okay, we may let them fill out their evaluations. Is that okay, Jamie? I know we're early, but I see some eyes getting real super heavy. Isn't it terrible after lunch how we sit down and we're like, I'm going to go now. But I'm going to be here and available for questioning, and also if you want to take a look at some of these programs or ask me anything about the trainings, I'm happy to get you information if I don't have it. So once again, Cherokee, you guys are awesome. I appreciate you. Thank you for inviting me to come out. Your administration invited me to come out too. And I just, this is a really neat way to get the message out of what's important for kids that are struggling learners. So if we don't have any more questions, I kind of went really fast. I apologize, I tend to do that. But we're going to give you an evaluation to fill out. And otherwise, you guys have a great, safe, corona-free year.